branding in general is storytelling. It's a way to tell a story, the story of the brand, so that people can understand their motives, where they come from, what they offer, and they have to understand that in a matter of minutes.
Maria is an awesome branding designer here at Spring Studio. I really love talking with our team here at Spring Studio to learn a little bit more about design from them. She is an expert in all things branding and all things logo design. So it was really insightful for me coming from the UI UX side to learn a little bit more about branding and how startups can think about branding. She had some really insightful things to share. I especially loved this bit about how branding can saying hello to your audience or shaking hands with your audience for the first time. It was a nice visual for me, kind of understanding a little bit more about branding and why it's important.
When I did the masters, I kind of opened my eyes more and more about the actual importance of designing, not just creating a logo and adding some colors, but branding, the concept of actual branding.
Maria, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to chat. I think a lot of people have lots of questions about branding and logo work and just design in general. So I'm hoping to ask you some very specific branding questions. Hope you don't mind, so we can share with the audience. How does that
No,
sound?
that's why we're here, to share the knowledge.
To share the knowledge, exactly. So before we get into it, can you maybe briefly introduce yourself? Give us a 30-second or 45-second intro and your background, how you got interested in branding and design.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Maria. I started learning design. I wouldn't say I started designing. I started learning design as a hobby when I was in high school, I think, second year of high school. Just as a hobby, just because I was bored. I used to actually make the posters for my local cafe. We all have to start somewhere. And after that, unfortunately, I didn't really pursue this creative dream. So I didn't do a bachelor's, so like a full bachelor's in design, which, the bachelor's that I ended up choosing, I hated. And during the bachelor's, the pandemic hit. And I realized, for me, that period of time was such a blessing in disguise because I managed to realize that I do want to be in the creative industry. So I kind of went back to learning design by myself. Of course, there are so many great resources out there, but I did feel at the end of that, I did feel like I wanted a bit more. And I love learning things in an academic environment. Even though you might not need it, it's still very fun. And yeah, and I did a master's degree in creative direction, which really opened my eyes more and more. I mean, by that time, I was already designing, I was already working as a freelancer, collaborating with clients and agencies. But when I did the master's, I kind of opened my eyes more and more about the actual importance of, being intentional and having that creative direction behind everything that you do and not just designing, not just creating a logo and adding some colors, but definitely, branding, the concept of actual branding. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think what stood out for me is the fact that you like to learn in an academic setting. I feel like nowadays especially it's so easy to, I say so easy, but it's so widely available. Like there are lessons and there are ways we can learn practically anything and everything through YouTube and online. So deliberately choosing maybe going down the academic route, I think is a little bit foreign to me because like I definitely learned the other way. Tell me about some of the benefits you found, like learning in an academic setting versus just kind of like teaching yourself or watching YouTube.
Definitely, I think, the people that you have in front of you or you have a chance to have in front of you. And, after class, the people that you get a chance to talk to and, kind of steal some of those insights. And yeah, I think that's the biggest difference. Of course, even when you're in an academic environment, it's still up to you. It's still up to you to actually listen, not just hear, and actually take notes and actually look it up and research more. But I think that's the only thing that's missing from, all of these amazing courses that you can find online. Um, Many of these professionals don't teach courses. I wish more of them would. Actually, some of my professors did have like a little Domestica course. Domestica is a great platform. But I wish more of them would actually teach more proper, longer online courses, because yeah, it should be more accessible like that.
That's awesome. No, I love hearing that. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think everybody learns in a slightly different way. So hearing your side of things, like to give everybody a little bit of context, a little bit of background. The reason I asked that question, like I was homeschooled growing up, so I was very like relied on myself to teach myself things from a very, very early age. So that's just kind of how I always approached learning things, was like, okay, well, how can I teach myself how to do this? And, we live in a time right now where it's super accessible and super easy to teach yourself things. So I benefited from being from living in this time. But yeah, that's really interesting. I'd love to explore the academic route a little bit more at some other time. Talking about what you said, going to school specifically for creative direction, you used a word that I like to, I don't know, I think most of our team probably is annoyed by this word by now because I say it so often, but like we want to be very intentional about the design that we do and about the work that we do. We're not looking to just do cookie cutter stuff. We're looking to bring a lot of that intentionality, the human element back into design. Talk to me about why that is important to you as a designer, as a branding person, bringing that human element into the mix and being intentional about the work.
I think, of course, like the psychology behind it is that we all choose products and services. Usually we don't have a lot of time when we do. So, those extra 3 seconds that you can get from a potential customer just because you are saying something with your identity, with your logo, let's say, even though, of course, and we're going to talk about that later, of course, it's not just a logo, but, those extra 3 seconds, 5 seconds that you can get from a potential customer just because you are starting to say something, you are starting to tell a story, that's important. And I always actually try to explain to clients of ours. I try to say that it's like when you meet a person, when you ask for their name and then you look at how they're dressed, what's their style. If they have a funky cool style, you might be attracted to it or you might not, depends on the market that you're in, right? And then you want to hear their life story. Why are they here? How many languages do they speak, right? Like it's the same thing. We want to interact like that. We want to learn more about, of course, the humans that surround us, but also those products and services that we use every day. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I never really thought about it that way. And like I think this is why you're the expert in the branding side, is because I never really considered like the brand and the mark being, part of like introducing yourself. And we as humans introduce ourselves by giving our name. Brands have to introduce themselves with their logo, with their messaging, to hopefully find a way to resonate with potential customers. That's so interesting. I love that. So like I guess piggybacking off of that, like maybe you can give us a high level understanding of like how you like to define branding and maybe why it's critical for businesses, especially like startups, to like think about branding even in the early days.
Yeah, I would say, I don't want to get technical, and throughout this whole podcast, I'm not going to get technical at all. But I do, or maybe not at all. But I
Who
just want to
knows? Who
say it,
knows? We'll see.
just very human, very straightforward. I think that branding in general is storytelling. It's a way to tell a story, the story of the brand, so that people can understand, their motives, where they come from, what they offer, and they have to understand that in a matter of, again, minutes, because of course our attention span is getting shorter and shorter, by every year, right?
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I think that if I remember correctly, that's maybe a question I asked you during our initial interview, when you were considering working with Spring Studio. I think I asked you that question, and your answer of like branding is storytelling was like the the big unlock for me, and one of the main reasons why we decided to move forward and bring you in was like
Good to
branding is
know.
storytelling. I'm like, oh my god, that's such an easy, clean way to say it. So for all of you out there, think of your brand as a bit of your story. Like branding is storytelling. That's great. Um, that's awesome. So what about like maybe going a slightly different direction, but like what do you think about, or how do you think about the differences between like inexpensive cookie cutter logo branding offerings, just to spin something up, just to get something in front of potential customers right away, versus maybe something that's a little bit more intentional. It might cost a little bit more, might take a little bit longer to do. And is there room for both?
Yeah. So we were just talking about this actually, and I feel like I have this conversation often with my designer friends, or my workmates. I think it's or it's common for us to kind of criticize, the founders that decide to go for a cookie cutter logo. Or I've even had clients coming to me and just saying, oh, I just need this in like 24 hours. I have to present something. And of course I used to just say no, and feel a lot of anger, I guess, that, a lot of people still don't understand how valuable actual proper branding is. But I feel like in the last year, working with more and more founders, I've realized that it's totally fine. It's totally
Mm,
fine if in the beginning you just don't have the budget for that, you don't have the time for it, you don't maybe even know your own brand that well. And we were actually just talking about this yesterday. It's somehow even easier to work with a brand that's trying to scale up instead of start up, just because they kind of understand what they're doing, their purpose, their mission, their vision, everything. They understand it better, 6 months or a year from founding the company. Because yeah, in the beginning, some of us or most of us don't really know what we're doing. So yeah, there is room for both, for sure.
room for both. I think that's a great point, because like oftentimes like we have the opportunity to work with a lot of startups that come to us and are going from 0 to 1, right? They have an idea. They have just an idea for a product. And maybe we're doing some UI UX design for a new SaaS platform that they're launching, and they have a name, they have an idea for the product, but they haven't like launched yet. They haven't gotten this in front of customers. They don't have any customers yet because the thing isn't built yet. So like I would imagine the storytelling element, the branding side of things, when you don't have a product yet, you haven't hit the market yet, you don't have users, the storytelling element isn't quite ready to be told yet. It's not quite there in some cases. How do you think about those early days if somebody does come to us and say, like, we're building this product, we do want to focus on branding because we know branding is going to be really important to us when we launch. Like when we're ready to launch, we want to launch with like a really strong brand. We want to make sure it feels cohesive and put together, um, but we don't know where to start. We don't know what to do. Like, how do you think about starting a brand from scratch, when maybe there's no business that exists yet, there's no product that exists yet? We need to come in and help kind of shape this brand into existence. Do you have a framework or process that you like to follow?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say first that, of course, the processes are different. So, there's still a discovery phase when it comes to companies that are kind of like scaling up. So they already have a something in place, a product or a service. But the companies that are literally coming to us and they're looking to start from scratch with us, that's definitely 100%. That's my favorite type of client, first of all, and that is because that initial phase of research is just much more extensive research and discovery. And I think the fact that they're basically discovering things together with us, they're still discovering things about their own brand together with us. Like, in that sense, like, I can even say that we are playing that role of, giving even kind of business advice, in a way. And we're like researching the market together. We're looking at competitors together. And then they say, oh, that's right. This one competitor, maybe I didn't even know about that company. So I'm just going to take a look now. And it's so cool just because, again, like, we're doing this together a lot more. It's, they're usually way more involved. But yeah, if you want to take it kind of step by step to explain that process, I definitely start, here at Spring Studio, we kind of have this kickoff call. That's an initial call. And we kind of put the brief together. And that means that, we ask the questions and then we kind of get those insights to be able to put together that proposal. And the questions are, first of all, again, because it's about storytelling, we want to hear the story and how the brand started and why, of course, that's a very important question. And then we start even thinking about some possible directions. Sometimes the founders even have some ideas about that, which is great. They have, some of them just come with like mood boards. And again, like, it's so exciting to see when it's not such a singular, like, myself as a designer is not like, I'm not just doing that by myself. I'm not just working by myself. It's so exciting. And then, yeah, we're, separately kind of doing our own market research. They usually have their own market research and competitor analysis, and they kind of come with that, and we kind of merge them. So we create this beautiful, beautiful, and very big, complex initial concept proposal. So we're not, drawing anything. We're not going into Illustrator. We're not doing anything of that sort. We're not even sketching yet. It's just about kind of understanding the why and the what, and then just proposing some directions, just to kind of, in simpler terms, mood boards. We're creating
Yeah.
mood boards so that we kind of, yeah, we kind of see like what they're attracted to and what they think, and then slowly we start to iterate after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this like idea of an upside down triangle that starts very, very broad. And as the mood board takes shape, as the feedback starts to be passed over to us, all of these things filter down through that triangle into what will essentially be the logo mark. Like at the bottom of that triangle, at the bottom of the funnel will be that logo mark. But in order to get there, we want to be very intentional with each step. So creating those mood boards that are based on that brief that you talked about, based on the answers to some of the questions that we ask, things like how do you feel like your brand, like how do you want to be represented online, like what sort of adjectives would you use to describe your brand or your future brand or your business, like how do you want other people to feel when your brand shakes their hand for the first time? Is it enthusiastic, excited? Is it maybe a little bit more like safe, secure? So we want to build that trust. Like all of those things will then, starting at the top of that funnel, will then start to filter all the way down to what will eventually be that final mark that hopefully they'll use for years and years and years to come. But because we did all of that work and asked those questions and kind of worked through that process, we feel confident, they feel confident that, okay, this is a really, really great intentional brand that we're starting to build.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, the analogy with the triangle, having a strong base is gonna, you know, that's how we know that the triangle is not gonna tip over, right? Like this whole brand is not gonna fall through, and just because, you know, maybe they don't have that intentionality. And that's because, again, one of the questions that I hear a lot from my clients is or not even question, but like demands. They say, we want to create a timeless logo. We want to create something
Yeah.
timeless. We don't want to have to do this again in 5 years. To which I say, well, you know, you might do this again in
We
five
might.
years, but
Yeah. You
but
might
we
want to.
are,
You might want to do this again in 5 years.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
even though the Starbucks mark has largely stayed the same for a lot, many years, it has evolved. It has gone through changes and updates. There are very few marks that I can think of, very few brands that I can think of that just haven't gone through any changes over the years. Like, it's a natural thing. It's, as the market shifts and changes, as your core audience, your core demo might shift and change, your product offering, it's not like you're going to sell the same exact thing to the same exact group of people forever. Like, that will most likely shift and change over time.
Yeah, no, because they're usually saying that because they think, you know, we don't want to necessarily follow design trends, because of course those shift every like 2 or 3 years or even less. But it's not even about design trends; it's about market trends, and it's about, you know, their offering changing and their product changing. So it is a natural process.
Yep. Well said. Well said. So maybe we can get a little tactical. Thinking about storytelling and branding in general, can you think of like maybe three things that a brand just starting out should consider, should think about when creating something from scratch? Like, say they're doing it in house, they're doing it on their own. Like, what are three key things that they should think about or focus on when creating a brand?
I mean, I have to say, definitely, you know, try and follow this process at least a bit. So, you know, even though, of course, brands and founders have these workshops at the beginning to kind of figure out their offering and their mission and everything, but when it comes to branding, do it again. Do it again, start from scratch, you know, pull up Canva or whatever and write mission, this, vision, this, tone of voice, this is how we want to address people, this. And then just try and like read it over again and again. Again, also competitor analysis, so important. But yeah, well, I guess this all kind of sums up in one singular advice, which is don't rush head first to kind of, you know, decide on a logo and colors and everything. Even if you're pressed and pressured by time, just don't. Just take a weekend, do that research, read everything through multiple times again and again, ask yourself a lot of questions. And then another thing that I would say is, and a lot of people do this actually, a lot of our clients, a lot of founders in general, don't mix your personal preferences with what your brand is supposed to be, because I've heard it so many times, like literally me asking, what do you think? And they say, well, I personally like that more. And then the because after doesn't refer to something related to the brand. It refers to
Hmm.
something related to them. Like, oh yeah, I personally prefer blue as a person. Me,
Yeah.
Maria, I prefer blue. That's not a thing that you're supposed to consider. Literally, you have to separate yourself from the brand. Like that's a very important thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great reminder. I think we all come in, and this is just like maybe something that speaks to the larger idea behind design and bringing our biases into the work that we do. We try our best to leave those biases away, like leave them out of the work. But especially somebody who's coming in, maybe thinking about their brand for the first time, and like, okay, well, what color should we use? We should probably just use like blue because I like blue. All right, so what sort of font pairing should we consider because I like this or I like that? And what it sounds like you're suggesting is, instead of relying on your own preferences, think about the brand as another person, as another thing with its own opinions that are addressing the market, addressing the audience, addressing somebody else. So, yes, you might be able to bring some of your personal influence into brand creation, but for the most part, think of the brand as its own thing. You are creating a brand. You are not creating, or unless maybe you're creating a personal brand, for example. Like I think there's that difference there. Like if I'm creating the personal brand Tristan Rice, like I might lean on, like, I do like the color blue and I do like really minimalist design. So like maybe I go the minimalist, but that's for the personal brand. But somebody, designing the Spring Studio brand, for example, that is completely antithesis to like what I like. It is completely the opposite, right? Like it's punchy, it's got purples and blues, but it's got gradients and it's got like a lot of stuff going on that is maybe a little bit different than uh, maybe the general direction that I would take my own personal
Yeah.
opinions or my own personal preferences. So I
Yeah,
think that's a great point.
yeah, you said it really well. Like you're creating a person, and the reason why you're doing so much research is to get to know that person, which is your brand. But that's why, that because you're trying to create a whole personality. You're trying to discover that personality. That's why the research process.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful image too. Like the way you just said it, I really liked that because you're trying to get to know that person, right? You just brought that person into the world. Like I'm not suggesting like a baby or anything, but like you're creating something and you're getting to know that thing. That's really cool. I like that.
It is a baby
Um,
for a lot of people.
yeah.
For a lot of people, it is their
I
baby. So
exactly. I joke with my wife Kelly that like my company, like Spring Studio, the company is like a child. It's like
of
another part of
course,
the
of
another
course,
member of the family. Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe taking a slight detour. What are maybe some common misconceptions about branding that maybe are top of mind to you, or maybe that you see often? I know you mentioned in the beginning, it's like branding is not just a logo.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
yeah,
that's
that
definitely
was
the
that
top
your
one. Yeah, first one.
yeah.
That's 100%, you know. Again, I did mention before, of course, it depends on your budget. It depends on, what stage you're at. But thinking that branding is not important. And I think, to that, I can say, well, look at all the actual companies and brands that you can say, they've made it, and look at their branding and read the numbers and see how much they invest in it. And you're going to realize how important it is. And then if, the reason why you can't find one singular brand that doesn't have those kinds of numbers, and you can't find a brand that's amazing, that's doing amazing out there, and they're not investing a lot in branding. It's because those brands don't make it. Like that's just a hard truth. Like it. And yeah, again, like not to shame anyone, not to push anyone. Of course, it's a very complex process, pretty costly at times, but yeah, definitely consider it.
Yeah,
Consider
it's
it at
important.
some
It's
point.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maria coming in with the hard truth. I like it. So, what about, like, we know it's important to create a brand because we're telling the story. This is our introduction into the world. This is how we say hello to our audience, our potential customer. What do you think about maybe some tips for folks that have maybe gone through the branding process and they have a decent brand? How should they think about maintaining that brand consistency across different platforms, mediums, touch points? How should they think about that? Is that also important?
It's first of all, it's still part of branding. We were just talking about how, branding is not just a logo. Well, that's also part of branding. And we usually send our clients off with very clear guidelines on how to address their audience and how their social media is supposed to look like, and a lot of templates for them to use. So again, that's really important part that we also do just because it is part of it. But I think also this cohesiveness, this consistency should come from we talked about, how the brand is a person or an
Mm-hmm.
entity, let's say,
There you go.
in
That's a good
itself.
word.
And I think whenever let's say this is that kind of founder that wears all the hats, and they're also like the social media manager, they're also responding to comments, doing everything, writing captions. If you're doing that right now, try to put yourself in the shoes of that entity, which is your brand. Don't think about how you talk and what your mannerisms are, and the way you type. No, don't think about that. Think about how your brand talks and types and everything. And visuals the same. Don't think about, oh, would I post this? Like, do I like this? Does this make sense? Think about what would your brand think in that way.
What would your brand say if they could see you right now? That's very well said. And I think this also goes back to this, something that you also mentioned which is like what we provide, a brand at the end of an engagement is not just some unnecessary stuff in a PDF deck. Like the PDF deck will be your brand guidelines. Here's how to use your logo. Here's how we shouldn't use your logo. Here's the tone and voice that we're thinking, makes sense for your target market, makes sense for this entity, makes sense for this brand. This is how the brand sounds, as well as like supporting visuals to help reinforce that tone of voice, that way we speak to folks, and then any other collateral, any other assets that might help. It's all to create this entity, this thing that is interacting with the world and interacting with potential customers. And it's so important that it's like not only consistent but also makes sense. Like, let's make sure it makes sense to the audience. Let's make sure it's consistent throughout all of the touch points. All of those things play a role. And I think so often, and this is something that I actually suffered from a couple of years ago, which is like we don't really have a clear idea of like what the Spring Studio brand is, what it should look like, how it should sound. And it wasn't until like later that we decided, oh yeah, that is important. We need a voice. We need consistency throughout all of our touch points and platforms that we're on. Because it is the way we're shaking hands with the rest of the world. It's how we show up to work. Are we in a suit and tie? Are we in flip flops? Like either is fine if that's the brand, if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, I think that part is even harder. Like, I think in general, our clients might have a harder time after we send them off with of course, with this very complex document of what to do, what not to do, how to
Yeah,
type, how to speak, what to post. But I think, once they're like on their own and they're really trying to figure out how to keep that consistency and engage with the outside world, I think that's harder for sure than like what we're doing for them, and what they're doing when they're still with us. Like, yeah, that's
sure.
definitely harder.
Yeah, makes sense. That's awesome. Any final thoughts? Anything that you want to share from your side? Anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to cover?
It is still, a very developing industry. It's still in development, or let's say like this specific niche of the creative industry is still very much in development. So I think it's really fair that a lot of founders and a lot of people don't really understand it, or they don't really know about it, or they don't know what it's about. But I think even this 30-minute podcast, it's one of the efforts that us in the creative community we're trying to make, and we're trying to put out there for people to learn. And yeah, we're trying to transfer that knowledge. I think that's great.
Yeah. To kind of touch on that a little bit, like the industry moves so fast. Like we see how AI is starting to play a role. I have said from the beginning, I think AI can really, really help in the creative space, in the creative industry, but I still think there's this intangible that only humans can provide, which is that human touch and that intuition and the feeling and the intentionality behind the work. So I think there will always be a human kind of driving the bus, so to speak, with a little AI sidekick helping out, helping streamline some processes or whatever. But yeah, the industry is moving so fast. So even in 6 months or 12 months, it's going to look a lot different than it does now. And we're just excited to be along for the ride, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Maria, this has been wonderful. If somebody wants to get in touch, can they find you on LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to really show my.
Oh, look at that! Look at that Spring Studio mug. How about that?
Let's read this. Do you think it's
Yeah,
going to
how
be
about
inverted?
that?
Actually, maybe not. I don't know
No,
if.
I think it looks good on
Well,
my
if
side.
it's
Yeah, I think it's
if it's
mirrored
going to
on your
be.
side, but it looks good on my side.
Yeah, well, hopefully it looked good. But yeah, that's from the swag pack that we got. Little Spring Studio mug. Yes, I do have a LinkedIn, and then I have a personal website, or which I think we can put somewhere. Maybe just because my name is not that easy to pronounce, so I'm gonna spare you that. So yeah, maybe we can just put it somewhere. But yeah, of course. And then you can always reach me through Spring Studio.
Awesome, Maria. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See ya.